Hello, everyone. I am Megan with Square One Small Business Services by Mid-Continent Public Library. Happy to have a full screen of faces here with me today. We are joined by our friend Susan Brown of the Central Bank, our partners on this Eat and Educate series that we offer quarterly, ish. So we'll give her a minute to say some words in a second here. You might recognize Xander from our food business classes from the Ennovation Center over in Independence. And then our special guest, Matt Shatto from the Shatto Milk Company, who will be having a chat with Xander about incorporating local businesses into your operations. So Susan, anything you'd like to kick us off with this afternoon?
So good to see you guys. As always, love this programming. As a reformed business owner, this was always my dream to have something like this when I became a banker, because I was always looking for just free information, whatever I could grab. And you all have been wonderful. I'm such a big supporter of Square One and the services that you all have for our small business owners. That support is critical. Central Bank is a great place. We have a passion for small businesses, all businesses, and whatever we can do to help, we want to help you all. I wanted to mention that we are going to try a kind of a hybrid event next month. I don't know if this is the right place for me to talk about this, Megan.
We can just give the date. That's fine.
Okay, and I don't remember the date. September
15th.
September 15th. And I think the topic is key methods to fund your business growth. And we're going to try this at at our Boardwalk location. So looking forward to getting back in person. It's been a really, really long time. So good to see you all.
All right. Thank you again, everyone, for being here. Just very quick housekeeping before I kick it over to Xander and Matt. If you have questions, don't be shy. This is your time. You're here to ask and get answers. So get in those comments, type your questions. I can pop them up on the screen for Matt and Xander to see, so we can make sure that those get answered. And then at the very end, we'll just post a little quick survey. It's only a few questions. It takes a second. Helps us keep doing this programming for free on behalf of the library, with thanks to our funding from the Kauffman Foundation. So with that, that's all I need to tell you. I'll take Susan and I away, and Xander, Matt, take it away.
Awesome. Megan with Square One, thank you so much. Susan with Central Bank, thank you so much for putting this on. Everybody that's joining us, thanks for hanging out in your lunch hour with us. Like Megan said, we're going to be talking about how you can incorporate local businesses into your operation. And of course, we're here with Matt Shatto. Thank you so much for joining us to have this conversation. I'm looking forward to it. How's everything going where you're at?
Things are good. Number one, first and foremost, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about this. One of our biggest focuses is how we support our local communities. So this is near and dear to our heart. But everything here is great. Just like where you're at, it's warm.
And speaking of where you're at, you're not in Kansas City right now. You're in Addison, Texas, right?
I am.
Okay. We're going to talk about why you're there a little bit more in the program later. So everyone there, stay tuned. We're going to figure out why Matt is in Texas right now. But let's jump into the topic, incorporating local businesses. So first and foremost, let's talk about why local businesses are important, and why, Matt, is it important for businesses to consider local, to consider the local guys? Why is that important?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, it's if we don't support each other, then who's going to support us, right? And I think that when we started the milk company in June of 2003, we were very fortunate in the fact that whether it was folks local to where our dairy farm is out in the country, or the people of Kansas City, we had so many people reach out and offer assistance, whether that was simply a year whenever things were tough, or we got to a point in which that we really had no idea what direction to turn, or whether that was assistance in, trying to help us promote ourselves through their avenues or their products or those relationships. So we saw that firsthand when we started the milk company in 2003. And I think that feeling, while deep-seated then, was exacerbated over the course of the coming 2 decades, as we had been on grocery aisles and inside different specialty shops and seeing how much, and now I'm going to get on a soapbox, but how much of what is provided and what's defined as local as not really local. And so whenever you have some grocery chains that define their local product as 250 miles away, I mean, no offense, but in my view, things that come from Chicago have no reminiscence of local whatsoever. And it doesn't help our local economy. It doesn't help small business owners here. It doesn't help, try to create more sustainable products and help the environment by trucking it all across the country. So without going too deep into those deep-seated thoughts, I figure I'll stop here. But there's many, many reasons why it's very important to shop local first.
Well, and that question absolutely warranted the soapbox. And there was so much in there when we're talking about how it directly affects the local economy. When you're talking about, particularly in the food industry, you're talking about sustainability. When you're talking about just the community of those local businesses and how they work together and how that kind of rising tide helps out everybody. There was so much in that answer. So that was beautiful. Thank you for kicking us off talking about why this is important. So
Sure.
Now we're going to switch gears and kind of talk about, all right, how do we do this? What are some of the things to consider when incorporating local businesses? So I've got kind of 4 general categories that I want to talk about today. This is certainly, for those of you listening, this is certainly not an exhaustive list of all the things that you could potentially do to incorporate local businesses, but I wanted to focus on 4 that Shatto Delivery has done a great job with. And 4 that we see a lot in the local Kansas City business community. So the first one is just actively doing business with other local businesses. So Matt, my question for you is, as a business owner, how do you think more strategically? How do you actively think about, okay, if I got to buy stuff, I got to pay for services. How do you actively, what are some strategies for making sure that that's incorporating local?
Sure. Well, and let me give you a little bit of that answer from kind of our background and kind of how we've gotten to where we're at with our home delivery side of our company. When we went into and created Shatto Home Delivery 5-6 years ago, we weren't arrogant enough to suggest that we could build a home delivery company on just delivering milk to your doorstep. While that is the concept, bringing back the milkman to Kansas City, we also knew that we needed other things to provide additional margin in order for that business to be successful. And so while we could have easily bought Charmin toilet paper and PepsiCo and all those types of things, a little bit for us wasn't even really a question from the standpoint of those are not things that we want to provide, right? We want to be unique. We want to be different. And so then that really raised the conversation for us of, well, what do we love? And what we love is primarily local products. And we love them because they're unique and they're things that are specific to our region. We have a relationship with employees that work for these companies or owners of those companies. And so we knew that we wanted to partner with companies that not only were local, but from our standpoint, top of category local, right? I mean, I don't want to just offer somebody roasted peanuts because they're roasted peanuts. I want to offer the best doggone roasted peanuts that are available. And so that's kind of how we set out initially to try to start identifying, who potential partners would be for us. And so we would identify essentially a category, whether you talk about coffee, proteins, milk, bread, whatever else it may be, and try to identify what, from our standpoint, we think from a brand perspective as well as from a product perspective, were top of category. And then we would essentially reach out to those folks and just say, hey, we love what you're doing. We love your stuff, right? It's I don't know how old you are at the company, whether we're talking to a new company that's in the infant stages or one that's been, well situated for quite some time. But the simple conversation that we had in reaching out was, how do we benefit each other? How do I help getting your product in more people's mouths in Kansas City? And then to your point earlier about a rising tide raises all boats, I want every one of my partners to be successful, whether it's on my platform or whether it's when I sell it direct or through another third party. Because at the end of the day, the stronger their brand is, the stronger my brand is. And, we've seen that be a considerable function in how we've grown our company on the home delivery side for the past 6 or so years.
That's excellent. And it speaks to that importance that it's really a symbiotic relationship when you're working with other local businesses. Whereas in some cases, if you're just getting for your example, just getting the roasted nuts to get the roasted nuts, it's a transaction. It's, important for business, but really, thinking about that strategy of let's incorporate these local businesses into what we're buying. It's helping us all out. And you have that unique relationship already. So that was a key component too of just starting to talk with these folks and get to know them and kind of get to know those local businesses.
Yeah, and I would suggest we've learned a lot along the way. And I think that one thing also that provides some great opportunities, not only for us as the seller in this case, but also for the business that we're partnering with, but it's also for the community and the fact that as we were exiting COVID this past year, and things were starting to kind of get a semblance of normalcy in our world again, I had a one-on-one meeting with every owner of every company that we buy from. And with that, it provided me an opportunity to learn about what their life has been in the last 12 months. But it also provided us an opportunity to really have a frank conversation that I would never be able to have with a non-local or an industrial or an institutional type of company. And that is, what's on your radar for the next 12 months? This is some thoughts that I've had for products that I would like to have to sell and offer my customers. Here's a tweak. I'd love for you guys to consider this. And I think through those conversations and just those one-on-one relationships, the innovation that we can create and the opportunities that we can create for both companies have been beyond what I could have ever imagined. And honestly, it probably wouldn't have come to be but for COVID in this specific case. So, as we're looking for a silver lining, I think that's one of them from a relationship perspective.
And I'm glad that you kind of mentioned this from this past year. And I didn't consciously think of it because, everything was crazy. But yeah, the local businesses that I utilize, that our organization use, they did reach out. We had a conversation. It was more personal about, hey, how are we getting through this together? And you're absolutely right. We did not get that from national X, Y, or Z company. So that just, again, speaks to that symbiotic relationship that you're in it together for those businesses.
Absolutely.
To switch gears. All right. So for those local businesses, maybe they're just getting started up or they're still kind of in that scaling up process and they're like, you know from the outside, there are companies like Shatto Delivery that are looking for local products. What would be your recommendation to the small businesses listening right now who are like, how do I become more visible to those folks? Whether maybe it is like stores that want to carry products, or it is other businesses that need to purchase services or goods. How do I, as a small local business, become more visible?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's probably a difficult one for me to answer in two ways. One, we're specific in the food world, right? So there's not a lot of overlap to plumbing supplies or other things that you might think of that's out of the realm of what we do. And then secondarily, whenever we started Shatto Home Delivery, we were somewhat in an advantage in the fact that we had already proven concept and had brand recognition from the milk company, right? And so how I will answer is probably not necessarily a one-size-fits-all, nor is it something that's going to be, something that's going to change the lives of many, just because of the fact that we probably got a little easier start than some. I think though it's simple. It's relationships, and we were fortunate to have many relationships, and our name recognition from the milk company opened up doors that probably would have been difficult to open, but for that. But I think that what I try to do from an owner perspective on a company that is buying from other small users is I try to be open to those dialogues, right? And I try to welcome anybody in that wants to have a conversation. Now, not everybody's like that, and there's probably some days that I'm not necessarily like that, and I don't treat or I don't act on the way that I preach. But I think being persistent and just first trying to create a relationship, right? Asking the question of, how's it going in your world? What are you seeing? Not, hey, I've got this product, I want to sell it to you, right? Because it's much easier for me to have a dialogue, get to know somebody and appreciate them and how they're different than it is for them to shove something in my face and say, hey, we've got the newest for us and this, if we're on that path, and we think that there's something special. And so I would say invest the time in creating a relationship. Don't push for the sale up front, I think is the first and foremost. I think the other thing is, and it's somewhat guerrilla marketing to a certain extent, and we did this a lot whenever we started Shatto Milk Company in 2003, and that was try to figure out and take those people that are brand loyal to you, no matter how old you are, whether it's one person or 20 people, and have them speak on your behalf, and have them go out and try to encourage those that you're trying to get in front of to understand that there is value, and there's value to them as the end purchaser. That was wildly successful for us on the milk company side. But at the same time, we got very involved in the community, whether it be through foundations, nonprofits, runs, that kind of thing. And so, again, trying to create that army of guerrilla marketers on our behalf was very, very important to us.
Okay, so I think there's a couple things in there. I do absolutely appreciate that marketing strategy of allowing your brand fans to kind of do some of the work for you. They want to. They love your product. They love you. They love the company. How do you encourage that? Because I think you're right in that if I say my product is the best, well, of course I'm going to say that. Like, why you would expect nothing else. But if Matt, you have my product and you're like, okay, yeah, seriously, Xander's thing is really good. You should like his roasted. We're going to go with the roasted nuts example again. Like those are great. Like you should go with those. That means something a little bit different coming from somebody that's not, the owner of that company.
Absolutely. And specifically, if they're going to be an end buyer for that product from you, right? And so take a grocery store example. So for us, if we had customers going into whatever your grocery store of choice, and they were hearing from their clientele that we want this in your store because it's on the street, it's pretty easy to understand that grocery store is going to want to make sure that customer doesn't have to go down the street to get something.
Absolutely. Another thing I want to pull out what you said there. Let's be honest. I think you're being a little bit modest. You're like, we built all the relationships. That took strategy, and that took time, and that took skill, and that was something that, again, over time that you built up, that you knew we've got to engage with these folks. This is going to be important to us. And maybe it, for, like we were saying, for some folks, it might just come naturally. You're like, that's the thing to do. But maybe for some of the folks that's not the case, just be thinking about that a little bit more particularly about, hey, maybe we do need to go hang out and be a member of the local chamber, or maybe we need to go to these events and spend some time after the vendor fair, or talking with the other vendors here, or whatever it may be. If it doesn't come naturally, but it's a fantastic strategy that came naturally with the business over time. But maybe for the startup company, you're like, all right, how do we start building that? So when we can say, 10, 20 years down the road, we built really strong relationships with the business community.
Well, and I think, to me, it's a strong comparison to an interview process for those that are looking for a job somewhere. And I think that if you do that right, the worst thing that can happen in the interview process is not get the job, but you understand why you weren't the right fit. And I think the same is true as it relates to a company trying to get product out there. And if you create that relationship and you have an open and honest dialogue with those that you're trying to pursue, again, the worst case scenario is you don't get that sale, but you get feedback as it relates to maybe other folks that you should pursue, other avenues in which that you should look for to sell your product, or why it's just not right in that specific case. Which, I think if we can all agree that if those tidbits of information at the end of the day build a mountain that you can use as a stepping stone for your next opportunity.
And then you think back about if you were being too salesy with the pitch, or you think about how you did things 5-10 years ago, and you're like, wow, incrementally, I didn't notice it as it was happening, but we've really smoothed that out quite a bit. We do a significantly better job, but yeah, it's just incrementally you're learning those things. It's not going to go from like 0 to 100 within that first month. But yeah, taking that feedback. And then the other thing too is you don't know if, depending on what your product or service is that you're offering, some of those are more like high consideration decisions. People are not going to, change their service provider for something, just on the fly, but they'll keep you in mind that if something changes, if the, company that provides your cleaning services, like if something happens and maybe they close up shop, well, I talked with those fine folks at this other cleaning company. I like them. I see them out, and we talk like that's the top of mind who I'm going to go with. But you might not make that conversion right away. But just building up incrementally over time and those relationships and how valuable those become as you grow that business.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about another category of working with local businesses. I want to talk about cross promotion. You hear it sometimes if you're taking like a marketing class, or you might see cross promotions, but like, how do they work? Like, how do you start a cross promotion? Who talks to who? How's it all function?
Sure. And so that's huge for us in the home delivery world, right? And honestly, we've done quite a bit of it on the milk company side as well. And I'll give you a couple examples. But I think it's first and foremost having those partners that understand that, again, the rising tide concept, right? And so as long as you both understand that there is a win at the end of whatever it is that you're embarking upon, by embarking upon it together, then it shouldn't be a problem. So, for example, we have a great relationship with the folks at Farm to Market Bread Company. We think they make great bread. We offer it through a home delivery service. We think that they do it the right way. And so, a number of years ago, before we even had a home delivery service, they had actually reached out to us from the milk company perspective and said, hey, we think we've got the best bread in Kansas City. We think you've got the best butter in Kansas City. What goes together better? And so they had basically just said, hey, you know what? Are you guys interested in providing us some butter that we can sample at farmers markets whenever we do, samplings at farmers markets to sell our bread? Well, it's a no-brainer, right? I mean, what's my out-of-pocket cost? It's very minimal. And if I get exposure, and I get exposure in connection with another top-of-category brand in Kansas City, it's a win for everybody. And if we can enhance the quality of their product in the mouth of their customers when they come by, it obviously is a win for them too. And so, for example, we took that relationship and brought them into our home delivery company for obvious reasons. The home delivery company is one where we do cross promotions almost on a weekly basis, whether that's buy one, get one, or whether that is, just having cross-selling items. So whenever you pick up, whenever you decide to add into your cart hot dogs from Paradise Meat Locker, it's suggested to you that you need hot dog buns from Farm to Market Bread, right? And so having conversations with those providers about what really is a good fit and mix with your products and other things that are on our site. And then in addition to that, it's the conversation of, I think, about Valmea's Coffee Roasters. They're one of the coffees that we offer through our home delivery service, and talking to him of, what is it that we can do to help you get a bigger win? And that means sell more product. And so we sat down, we had a long conversation, and Bo at the time had an idea of, let's put together these little 2-ounce packages of coffee, and we'll just give them to you as a company that we're selling through. And we're unique in the fact that we can put it in people's porch boxes that have an affinity for coffee, and we try to test that and choose that and see if we can't get some mutual win from that standpoint. So, again, I think nothing is abnormal. Nothing is something that's out of the realm of possibility if both of you come to the perspective that, hey, we're better together than we are ourselves.
So I love thinking about it. This is my new phrase for it: finding the butter to your bread. In that particular scenario, you're absolutely right. It was almost serendipitous that it's just like it almost happened by itself.
Right.
In that case, you're just like, okay, we're in the same realm here. These things go together. I almost watched this cross promotion happen from afar. But then I love that you juxtaposed that to the example you gave with Thou Mayest, in that you were going in with the thought process of, hey, we need to be working together and promoting one another. How will we make this work? And that it can happen any which of these ways, whether you just decide, hey, this is a company that we know, let's think strategically, or like, oh my gosh, this is already happening. I'm watching customers put your butter on our bread. Like, we should be thinking about this more strategically.
Yeah, and I would argue, I mean, obviously the cliche is bread and butter, right? But I would argue that in all of our worlds, there are things that equate to the simplicity of that. And I think that, you take a plumbing contractor and makes PVC, right? What do you have to make PVC functional? And you have to have the little glue stuff that makes it go together, right? And so I think as long as you can have an open mind and having a conversation, and in many cases, we just sit down with some of our partners and just literally come into a room with no pad of paper, no anything else, and just say, we've got to do something more. What is it? How can we better partner? And really don't leave the room until all of the ideas are flushed out. And again, there's no idea that's a stupid idea. And we try to think that around here. I mean, we do some pretty crazy stuff on the home delivery side. Some stuff that in retrospect, I'd probably say, why do we ever do it? But I mean, you don't know unless you try. And so, trying to figure out in your specific industry what that bread and butter is, what that PVC pipe and whatever the primer or whatever else it is, I think are, pretty easy conversations with yourself or with your partner if you just allow them to happen.
Well, I think there's some important there where you're saying, hey, some of these didn't pan out. I would argue that, like with many things in business, if you haven't had some failures, you're not going out there and doing enough. Like, there should be some of those that you learned, you watched, you measured it. You're like, yeah, one didn't work out. We learned some lessons. We'll approach this differently next time. But that means that you've found in that process those opportunities that are your bread and butter opportunities that just come together perfectly.
Absolutely.
So excellent. Let's switch gears a little bit. So we were talking about just cross promoting. Actually, I did want to mention another thing. We were talking about plumbers, and that made me think of, it doesn't even necessarily have to be bread and butter. It could be bread and bread. I'm getting too lost in this metaphor, but say you're a marketing agency.
Right.
There will come a time that either a project is not within your area of expertise, or you're too busy actually working together alongside other and knowing the other marketing companies that might say, hey, you've got experience marketing food products. I'm going to recommend that this client that approached us work with you guys, and then vice versa. If you work better on service industry, they send some of those clients your way. So it could be within the same, what you would typically think of as your competition, like, ooh, don't talk to them. No, there's an opportunity even there to have some cross promotion to help local and help work with local. That is symbiotic, that still helps both businesses.
100% agree.
All right, let's talk about taking that cross promoting a step further and talk about actual collaborations. Mm-hmm. So you're either coming together to collaboratively make a single product, or you're coming together to put on an event or something where you're taking it a little step further and you're really getting into the nitty-gritty of, we're producing an actual product together, we're putting on an event. Same kind of question. How does that work? How do you do that?
Yeah, so good question. And so we've done it in a number of different ways, predominantly on the milk company side with some different products and whatnot. But so take, for example, we make an ice cream sandwich. And honestly, it's my favorite product that we offer. And when we started offering this probably 10 years ago, the conversation was, again, how do we make it different? How do we make it the best that we can possibly make it, and the best that's on the shelves and available to the public in Kansas City? And so we reached out to a local bakery and said, hey, we like what you do. Talk to us a little bit more about your process, your procedures, and how do we make this work? And so, from our standpoint, it was basically having the desire to go out and proactively create that relationship with somebody that we had identified as, top of category again on the bakery side of what I've needed for those ice cream sandwiches. And so, and that's really no different than, to your point about, an agency or whatever, trying to partner with whom you think provides the best value to what it is you're trying to get the end outcome to be. But in that specific case, it was as simple as reaching out and saying, hey, we want you to be a component of an overarching product that we're putting together. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple supplier, seller relationship. Some things that have been a little bit different for us in partnership is we've done some things like Ronald McDonald House charities. We partnered with them to raise some money for some different things. We also did something similar for Children's Mercy, where we partnered with them, trying to make it, again, unique. I mean, we're all about the experience. We're all about trying to make people think, oh, that's kind of kooky, but that's really cool. And so we worked with Children's Mercy, not just to raise money for them, but to create a bottle on their behalf that told their story and told, in this specific case, Children's Mercy has a wonderful program that is basically a group of employees that go around and really try to help kids be put at ease during procedures and other things. And I had an experience with that with one of my kids, and honestly, he was so much better off because of the experience that he had. And so we wanted to figure out a way to give back. And so we created a bottle to try to educate the population about that, to try to generate giving on their behalf to Children's Mercy to support that program. But we also engaged the kids. They have a board of kids that kind of help the hospital make decisions and whatever else. And so we put them through a rigorous testing process of different milk flavors to let them choose what flavor we did. And so whether we're looking to create an ingredient for a product that we're going to make, whether we're looking to partner with somebody to create education and opportunity for them, or we're simply trying to make a new flavored milk that we think, doing it in partnership with, pick somebody, Christopher Elbow or somebody else, would be of mutual benefit. For us, it's simply, again, and I don't mean to be repetitive, but going into a scenario, understanding our idea might be a stupid one, but at the end of the day, if we pare it back, maybe we could reduce some of the stupidity and make it legitimate. And in many cases, we found that to be the case. And honestly, Kansas City has been wonderful as it relates to providing an avenue through these companies, through these organizations, where they come from the same perspective. There's no silly idea, and let's figure out a way to make it work.
All right, I'm going to call you out here, Matt, again. I think you're being a bit humble because you're like, it's pretty, you do this and this and this. And it comes from experience, and it comes from having done this a lot of times and being a bit of a natural. But what you described is there was a number of steps from just kind of going from the value proposition and the overall brand to you're meeting with these folks and you're thinking strategically about, okay, how can we take maybe our weaknesses on our side and pair them with your strengths and vice versa to be more than the sum of the parts in that case. So I loved your description of how it had worked for you and kind of your thought process on it. And that exactly makes sense to make sure that you've got something strategically that will function and then something that will have a return for those efforts.
Yeah.
And then on the other, like, personal side, I love that, like thinking about and you get that more working with local businesses and local organizations, is that you think back and you're like, hey, that, it was outside of the realm of our businesses, but it comes back around. And kind of a karmic way, but also logically that you're working with these other local businesses, that you will have that maybe personal connect outside of the business realm. And that's also, a benefit and a consideration for thinking about local. I want to ask you, because you're getting on a collaboration, you're getting maybe not married, but you're like, maybe those businesses, you're getting into each other's operations really at this point. You're like seriously dating, maybe. That's the metaphor that I'll use. What are some of the challenges that you've encountered when working on a collaboration, or if you're willing to share, maybe there was one that you're like looking back and you're like, okay, that one didn't make sense, but here's why, and here's what we learned from it. Any challenges or pitfalls?
Yeah, great question. And so I think you have to come into any partnership or relationship in the business side, similar to on a personal scenario, and you have to have some sense of trust, right? And so the great thing is, probably more so than the dating example, is that all of our companies that have been around for a while, whether that's, again, 2 years or a year or 20 years, has a track record, right? And so and I've thrown out a number of companies that we've worked with, Farm to Market, Elbow, some others, and so what you're getting into whenever you reach out to them initially, and that there's a trust factor. You've rubbed elbows or you've talked to them in passing in the past. And so, so long as you come into a relationship, no matter what knowledge you have of that company to begin with, is that you're going to go into it trusting the other one with the idea that you have the best interest of the whole in mind. I think that gets you a lot further than coming in and trying to be so doggone protective that you don't let anything go through the project that is not on your terms. I would say, going back to the ice cream sandwich example, we did identify, we picked what we thought was the best choice for us from the bakery side of that project. We, soon thereafter of releasing that product, Google Fiber had come into Kansas City, and they were ordering tens of thousands of ice cream sandwiches from us a week. And nothing that we could have ever anticipated, and nothing that we would have even rightfully even projected. But it created a demand that our bakery partner couldn't fulfill, and in retrospect had no desire to fill. And that is not necessarily a fault of theirs. It's not necessarily a fault of ours. But nonetheless, at the end of the day, we were left in a scenario by which that we had promised this end buyer product, and we couldn't fulfill it. And I think the unique thing about that process was that knowing that bakery had no desire to really scale and no ability to scale to do it, that scenario could have went one of two ways. We could have separated and everybody helped the other one move on and try to find a solution, or we couldn't have. I think from that experience, we learned a lot as it related to things to ask our partners in the future. I think we learned a lot as it related to having partners that had a mindset of exceeding expectations to even the detriment of their own sleep schedule or whatever else. And I don't say that specific to the ice cream sandwich thing, because that's not a true example. But I think when we get into something, we're all in. And if I have to work a 23-hour day, unfortunately, I'm going to work a 23-hour day. And just making sure that what you expect of yourself is expected of your partner and vice versa is, I think, very meaningful and very beneficial, and something that we probably didn't even think about until we had that problem that existed primarily because of an increase in demand that we never would have guesstimated.
I do remember that now. I've got fond memories of everybody being super excited about Google Fiber and then ice cream sandwiches.
Right, absolutely.
But you make a fantastic point about expectations. Right. And that kind of extends to a lot of different business components, whether you're business partners in a business or you're two organizations that are collaborating. Because you had it wasn't even on your mind at the time of, yes, we're going to get an insane amount of orders all at once. But talking about those things early on can help, kind of get that all out there. And then too, maybe it is an example, like if you went back in time, you're like, all right, if I do this again, we'd say we definitely want to work with this particular company to this scale. But that, and you would then be lining up once we get to our regional distribution or once we get to this phase. And if it's all out there, if you've got, some sort of agreement in place, however, stringent or legal or contracty it is, at the very least, you've got that all out there, that hey, here's what we do in XYZ scenario should it occur. But that's a great example. Thank you for sharing that one.
Yeah, and I think many of us included, on new projects, you just hope that it breaks even, right? I mean, that's when you get excited. You're not expecting for that regional distribution of the product to the Rocky Mountain district or whatever else it is. And so for us, it's and we need a habit of that. Unfortunately, we don't learn from our mistakes. But I think that you don't know what you don't know until you realize you don't know it. And I think that's an example of through that experience we grew, and that's the positive thing from that is we learned a lot about ourselves. We learned a lot about how to partner in the future, and so be it.
Which goes back to how now today you're like, it's easy. We do these things. And it's from all those lessons. So, I mean, the point I'm trying to make there is for the folks listening in, like, don't get discouraged by those things. At the best of your capacity, learn from folks like Matt that have that experience, who've gone through those. You should have the opportunity, audience, to make your own unique not mistakes, but like get into your own unique scenarios that you learn from. Right. So I absolutely, I like that. And then I love that you were able to, from that, it wasn't like, oh, the heck with collaborating with these other businesses. Yeah. It's more, we learned that this is something to be thinking about ahead of time. All right, great. And makes it so much easier for you today.
For sure.
Let's shift gears. So we had talked about just strategically and actively doing business with other local businesses. We had talked about actively cross-promoting other local businesses. We had talked about really getting together and working together on something, on a collaboration. So the fourth category that I want to talk about is actually fully building a business model that is centered around local businesses. And this is why you're the perfect person to talk to, Matt, is that Shatto Delivery is that. It is the whole purpose that you've got it on your website is we work with local businesses. That's key to our value proposition. Can we take a trip down memory lane about the process and the founding and the ideation and that early stages of building essentially a new business? It did come from, the Shatto Milk Company, but it offshot and then became its own business entity. Can you talk about that early process?
Yeah, so again, I mean, from my opening comments, we knew that we had to have ancillary product to the milk supply in order to make the numbers work. With that in mind, we then simply made a list of what are the priorities in a household, right? We would like to think that everybody needs milk in their home. Not everybody does, but we like to think that. And we also know that people consume a lot of eggs. They consume a lot of proteins. They consume a lot of a variety of things that are made here in the metro. And so we knew from a capital perspective that we couldn't go out and just buy pallets of every product that we thought could ever be sold on our home delivery service. So we started pretty small, had some key partners that we reached out to and said, hey, this is what we're thinking. This is what we want to do. And would you like to jump on board with it? And we started from one customer, right? And so it's somewhat difficult, even with, brand recognition and the name recognition that we had, to get somebody to say, oh yeah, I'm gonna drop off to you one chicken breast on Thursday for a Friday delivery. Economy of scale doesn't make so much sense. So we had to work with them on that as far as logistics. And that was probably, if I would say there's one thing that's the most problematic for us, it's logistics, for a variety of reasons. But and those take care of themselves as you grow, right? If you have success, then they kind of work themselves out and create different problems of different types. But we probably had a core of 10 to 15 local companies that we sourced products from to start. And we decided we were going to take a small bite of the apple. We were going to focus it on the milkman concept, and then what we were going to do is try to grow each one of those customers to learn to enjoy more local products as we added them on. And so that's the kind of the way that we went about it. Fortunately for us, that we were successful in that startup phase and moved and grew, and obviously, through that time, our challenges have changed. But at the end of the day, the local partnerships, the local product that we offer, they're so unique in regards to some of them you can't find in grocery or whatever else. And in many cases, they're so much easier to work with. But also, in many cases, there's more difficulties that you never would have anticipated that come about that we deal with on a daily basis. We dealt with during COVID and some other things. But at the end of the day, what we found is that again, if you partner with them, if you let them know what your expectations are, if you let them know what your concerns are, usually they're pretty amenable to trying to figure out how to solve those issues.
Absolutely. Okay. I want to know, is there an example of one of those things where it was easy to work with the local businesses? And then I'm going to ask you if there was an example that you can share about how it was more challenging.
Sure. So a great example in the past 12 months. So we use chicken and eggs from Campo Lindo Farms in Lathrop, Missouri. Great group of folks, great family, make a tremendous product, or actually have chickens that make a tremendous product. Carol, the wife of the couple, is very easy to chat with, and we talk to her on a weekly basis with orders and everything else. Going into COVID, we had heard that there was an uptick in sales of eggs through grocery, which on its own is not a big deal because egg sales were coming down in restaurants and other things for obvious reasons. The problem that we were running into was not that Carol didn't have eggs to get to us, but it was that Carol didn't have cartons to put eggs into, because out of no restaurant sales, all eggs that are delivered to restaurants are in flats of 12 at 11. Most eggs that are delivered to grocery are in a 12 count. Well, the industry, the supply chain, did not have enough 12 count egg cartons to accommodate the shift from restaurants to retail. And Carol's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And I said, well, okay, let's see if we can figure out a way to help. And so, again, it was her coming to us saying, hey, you're one of our biggest clients. I'm telling you ahead of time, I'm concerned. And I'm kind of asking a little bit passively for any ideas you have. And so we worked with her to try to get some egg cartons back from our customers, which we're already bringing milk bottles back anyway. And so we were able to do that to preserve some time to ensure that our customers were able to be taken care of. And then, honestly, because it's as much benefit to me as it is to her to sell me eggs, I located a source of 12 count egg cartons in Canada that she then got a semi-truckload of 30 days later that got her through the project. And so, again, but for that relationship, but for the comfortability or the comfort generally of being able to ask for help or share a concern that you see on the horizon, we wouldn't have gotten through that. And we're stronger for it. We sell more eggs today than we ever have in our company's history. And honestly, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that Carol reached out and we were able to do that. If Carol hadn't reached out and she would have called me on a Monday and said, Matt, I don't have any eggs for you this week, I would have been in some trouble.
Absolutely. I love this example of that you could and have the trust, like we've been talking about, that if I say, Matt, problem, yeah, you're not gonna, get mad at me. You're not gonna, you're gonna find a solution. And even if say there wasn't a solution, just knowing ahead of time from your perspective, you're like, hey, I can't get mad at you. I appreciate the transparency that helps us. And that you're absolutely right. If I was afraid of Matt, if I was like, he might just drop me right now. Right. If I'm telling him in the future I can't fulfill these orders, then that would be a different scenario. And they're like, oh, maybe we'll try to keep it going until we can't. but just that communication and trust.
I think that's what it is, right? I mean, I think because to your point, I could have easily gotten off that phone call and started calling other egg providers to try to figure out how I'm going to solve my problem. And instead of that, because I have such a great relationship with Carol and her husband, that never crossed my mind. And it was more of how do we help them help us? And honestly, the other thing was I was more thankful for her letting me know, not because she trusted us, but because she thought about our customers, right? And in a partnership, that's important. She thought about our customers enough to give me the opportunity to communicate with them, to let them know, hey, just FYI, this is some forethought. This could be coming down the pipe. That makes it easier on me. And of course, it makes it easier on them.
Absolutely. Oh, I love it. Okay, so we've got a question here from the audience. Matt, besides what you just described, how did the pandemic impact your local partnerships? Did you lose any partnerships? Would you think home delivery, you would think home delivery would do very well. Is that challenging for everyone?
Yeah, great question. So it enhanced almost every local partnership that we had during the pandemic. For the example, similar to that of Karen, with Campo. We added a lot of new partners. We tried to find people that were having difficulty because of the restaurant scenario. Take, for example, Jack Jack Barbecue. We brought them on to offer some of their proteins. We did so much more with, I mentioned Christopher Elbow earlier. And there's a whole list of partners that we gained through that process because we became kind of the go-to, right? And to the later part of the question, did very well. Yeah, we increased customers dramatically. We grew 230% the first 30 days. And so with that came increased demand for the products we had, but it also created an opportunity to provide products that we never contemplated before. And whenever you have a company calling us saying, hey, we lost 75% of our business because restaurants are not doing what they're doing, take Liberty Food Company here in Kansas City as an example. That's an opportunity for us to do something good too and say, well, let's see what else we got. Let's increase our purchase. And if you're having a hard time with capital, let us offer to pre-buy stuff in order to help you get through the time. And so we had a lot of conversations like that, trying to help our partners get through what was a difficult time for them, and acknowledging the fact that we were fortunate, right? I mean, we just happened to be in the right place at the right time. It wasn't anything that we did. It wasn't any marketing string that we pulled. It was simply we were sitting in the right industry at the right time. And a lot of other people were having difficulty. Is that changing for everyone? And I guess I don't really know the specific to that question, but I'll answer it as I take it. We did do well. I think it was very difficult for our employees during that period of time because we were working more than I could have ever imagined that we would work. And we tried to ramp up our employee base quickly. And I will say that no matter what we're talking about, conversation about getting new relationships, partnering or whatever, the key to anything that you can ever do is to have the right people on the bus. And I was reminded within the first 2 weeks, I was actually in Arizona when COVID, all the shutdowns started. And I decided to drive back immediately. And I realized on my drive back that I had the absolute best team that I could have ever hoped for in trying to address the challenge that we were faced with COVID. Even though it was a positive challenge, it created a lot of negatives for us. It created a lot of problems, both from a capital perspective as well as from an infrastructure perspective. And I think that what I learned is that, number one, I have an amazing team. And number two, above everything that we've talked about, if you can start off with an amazing team, then you're so far ahead of everything else.
I love that answer, and I know you cannot predict a pandemic or some of these disasters, but there was the thought process ahead of time of this infrastructure needs to exist for local businesses. Right. And because you had that foresight ahead of time, it then became an incredibly valuable resource in that time of disaster. And I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier with why is local important? Because having that local delivery service became that lifesaver for some of those other local businesses that their business model shifted overnight. Now, again, extreme example, but that, happens at a smaller scale regularly and is of value to your customers working with you, Matt, is that there is that level of flexibility with a local organization that you can, you'll not just think about, okay, how's this, making me some money right now, but like, hey, this is an opportunity for us to build some more relationships. This is an opportunity to help the community, help our customers out.
It's political capital, right? I mean, it's political capital in your partnerships with your other businesses, but it's also political capital in the time that, we're going to screw something up on our home delivery. And I guarantee you one day you're going to get cracked eggs. And, hopefully in that time of disaster, which in some cases it's true disaster when you're opening up your eggs in the crack, that, you remember that we're people too, right? And we do what we can when we can do it. And you also trust us that we're going to take care of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we talked about that example where it was easier to work with some local businesses. What are some challenges for those who are considering, building a business model around local businesses? What are some challenges? And then I'm sure, like we were talking about before, there might have been some examples or some lessons learned. If you're willing to share any of those, I think that would be great.
Yeah, so in a funny way, I'll kind of throw Milk Company under the bus. So obviously, Shatto Milk Company and Shatto Home Delivery are two separate companies. And what makes things local great are some of the things that makes local difficult. And so on the Milk Company side, we're different because we only use milk from cows that are on our farm. The great thing is we only use milk from cows that are on our farm. The bad thing is whenever summer heat comes and cows production goes down, but demand stays the same, we only use milk from cows on our farm. And so, one of the difficult things is whether you're talking about Milk Company, whether you're talking about bacon from Paradise Meat Locker, or whether you're talking about something else that, you don't even think of as being supply chain issues. These local companies, what makes them unique is also the potential thing that can make them very destructive to customer interaction. And so, I dread the day whenever we have, a shortage of 2% chocolate milk, because I know that there is a customer in Lee Summit that does not want anything but 2% chocolate milk. And as many times as I can offer her whole chocolate milk, she is infuriated in the fact that the milk company had to stop making 2% chocolate milk because milk production is down. And so, that's an example of a difficulty that we have. But we tell all of our producers, and so whether it's in Kansas City or somewhere else where we've done stuff, we'll go and have meetings and they're like, well, we don't have the capacity to keep up with your demand. No, that's perfect. Be you, right? Be you. Don't change a doggone thing. Let us deal with that. We'll put in a certain number that you have of whatever widget or jelly or jam or whatever else it may be. Once we're sold out, we're sold out. And let's be okay with it. And let's tell the story about why that's unique. And so in many ways, we try to turn that into and spin that into being more of a positive. But sometimes it is difficult to let customers know that a product that they're expecting is not going to come, really to no fault of anyone.
That is a perfect example because, from a larger organization, that might just mean, okay, we don't carry your product now. But you're taking that customer heat, but you're doing so strategically. That's a huge benefit to those folks that you're working with. But you can build that strategically, that it can be, you can think, okay, you can't get the 2% milk. Will you take the whole? We can switch out there. I will take both 2% and whole chocolate milk. I have my chocolate milk.
You're too easy.
But thinking through strategically, that is just naturally going to be a challenge of local businesses. That those value propositions of where this product has come from just inherently come with those challenges, but you've thought through that and accepted and embraced it, and have the alternatives to the extent that is feasible.
Right.
So that's excellent. You mentioned one already to this question, and the question is, what are some of the key steps that you would advise somebody wanting to get into their own locally focused business? And the one you had already mentioned was just having the right people. Is there any other steps that you would add or anything that you would elaborate on with building that team and finding those people, just to help out somebody who's thinking through, like, okay, we're building something, it's going to be locally focused. What are my initial steps?
Yeah, so for me, it's twofold. I had this conversation earlier this morning with a new hire where I'm at. And first, it's the idea of how you get them. And then it's the idea of what you do with them once they've arrived. And so for me, it's important that they buy into my mission, right? And my mission on the home delivery side is not just selling eggs. It's changing the way consumers consume. And if somebody's coming to me and they come from an institution that sold, commodity something, it's a very different conversation. And it's one that I really am hesitant about because I want them to take pride in what we do. I want them to be able to have a consumer conversation and be able to educate that customer about not why they should buy eggs from Campo Lindo, but by why they should support local and why they should really focus on the concept of just changing the way that they do what they do, because it's of benefit to the entire community. And so for me, it's first and foremost trying to get people that buy into that concept. The conversation I had this morning with a new hire here was, I came from the corporate world and I did that for a number of years. And I was in the C-suite and we hired a ton of people. We had infrastructure in place, but we interviewed them 19 times. We gave them test after test. And I could tell you everything about, what their grandparents thought and whatever. But what we would do after we find these top category employees that we're going to pay a ton of money to, we would then put them through the first week on the job of us telling them who we were and why they need to do what we tell them to do. And so I think the first component is finding the right people. The second component is letting our people be them, because we hired them for a reason, right? Because it's something they told us or something we learned about us. But if we're trying to turn them into who we are the day they get there, they have no value because they're just one of us. And so the conversation that I had with a gentleman this morning was, you're most valuable to me in the first 6 months, because you're going to see every blemish of this company better than I can see it as the owner, better than my operations manager can see it, better than any of my drivers can see it. And you have a responsibility to me for working here to tell me every one of those things that you find. And we'll have a conversation about it. Now, granted, at the end of the day, I reserve the right to make the decision either pro or con, but that's the value, right? I'm hiring somebody because of who they are, not because of who I want them to be. And if I'm hiring for who I want them to be, I can hire anybody and I don't have to pay them as much. And so I think it's twofold for me.
That's excellent. And it gets into, okay, a business exists to, make a profit, but no, why does this business exist? What is the key value here? And finding folks that are excited about it. You talk too about whether it's your customers or the other businesses that you're working with, that in this whole supply chain ecosystem, that love of local exists wherever in that system, and it makes that whole system stronger. And again, with the folks that you are building into that team, and I love the idea of you're hiring human beings for a purpose, is that they're human, they're unique, and they can provide things that cannot be automated. Right. Don't, through your process, automate that part out. That part is a valuable component of you. Please bring it along with you. I love that thought process, and thank you very much for sharing that. And I think that's something. Sometimes it happens naturally in the process of a startup. Sometimes it, is strategically built in, like you were describing, like this is why we exist. This is what I've learned. This is why we're doing those things. But definitely for those of you out there thinking about this, don't neglect that part, like the values and the it's you see it on your like business plan template, and you're like, I'm selling. Again, we're going back to that the nuts. We're selling nuts. That's what we do. Well, there's more to that. There's more value. Be thinking about that early on, bringing in the right people and everything. It just builds a stronger foundation for the whole thing. Let's actually. We're getting close on time. No, I cannot neglect to ask you. You're in Texas. Why are you in Texas?
We are starting a new we just started a new home delivery company here in the Dallas metro. So we're trying to replicate the concept that we have in Shatto Home Delivery in Kansas City here in Dallas. So that's what we're doing.
If you're allowed to, how did that come about? If you're allowed to speak to that.
Yeah, so we've sold milk in the Dallas metro through one grocery chain for about 2 years called Central Market. They're a high-end grocery chain down here, and we had no desire to do it, but they reached out to us, and they're kind of thought of one of the top 3 grocery chains in America. And so we wanted to take advantage of the opportunity. And through that process, we learned a lot about the Dallas metro. And what I learned was that there's a lot of money down here. There's a lot of density down here. And that then equates to pretty good for home delivery. And what we didn't want to bring our milk down because we preach local, right? And so it doesn't make a lot of sense to bring a Kansas City milk down to Dallas. So and it kind of goes along with partnerships, right? And this is probably the best example. I reached out to try to find some folks that I could potentially partner with and trust in the Dallas market. And there's a dairy operation down here called Volleman's Dairy, and they're about 2 hours south of Dallas in Comanche County. And I heard a lot of positives about them as people. Shot them a note and said, "Hey, I got an idea. I want to partner with you guys. I want to do some work with you guys." They said, "We're open to a conversation." I flew down 3 days later, and about 2.5 months later, we had an operating agreement. We created a company. And so, so it's a home delivery company very similar to Kansas City, except we're bringing the milkman back to Dallas.
I like that. Okay, so we had a little bit of foreshadowing early in our conversation. This is a bread and bread example, or in case milk and milk example, this is somebody that you might naturally think of as, that's a competitor of ours. But no, really, when we're looking at the value proposition of what our business is doing, it makes sense to work alongside somebody that we may have considered to be a competitor because it just makes business sense for everybody involved.
Well, and you're 100% right. They were competitive. They were on the same shelf that I was in the market on the dairy side. And so, and it was weird. I mean, it was awkward to reach out to somebody that you didn't know how they would perceive you, right? I mean, we're the out of town guy. And if anything, we should be the ones stepping back. And so, no, it worked great. They're a great family, and we learned a lot about them during our time of conversation, and I'm thankful that it's worked out so far.
Oh my gosh, so I love it. And it is, I'm glad that you brought this up because we do work with some businesses who their value proposition is local. All the stuff that goes into this, it comes from, 50 miles away or less. But that can be that same value proposition. It doesn't mean like, okay, I've done Kansas City, I'm done. It means that there's value to that. It could be the same model replicated in other metro areas.
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely.
All right, so now I'll say this is my most important question. I'll answer it first. So my favorite flavor of milk it's the chocolate milk, followed closely by the root beer milk, which Shatto was the first to introduce me to. When you're talking about like wonky combinations of things, first time I was like, that doesn't make sense, but I love it. Yeah. What, Matt, is your favorite flavor of milk?
I'm pretty simple. It's chocolate.
It's chocolate. All right. I like it.
Yeah, no, pretty simple. And it's difficult not to be. I mean, the milk company's chocolate milk has been named top 3 in the world at least 10 times, and it's the best.
I consider myself an amateur connoisseur of chocolate milk, and I have a trunk full of bottles that I need to return to the grocery store. All right. Oh, we do have a question. Erica here wants to know, will you ever make a watermelon milk?
And the answer is we'll never say never, but Erica will only do it if you go out on the road and sample it at stores and farmers markets. She'll get the answer on that.
Well, you heard it here first, everybody. The announcement of the watermelon milk. All right. I want to thank Mid-Continent Public Library, the Square One team, for bringing us together to have this conversation today. I want to thank Susan with Central Bank for sponsoring this and for putting on all of these conversations. Susan, I believe when is your next one of these? You've got one coming up in September.
September 15th, right, Megan?
That's right.
And hopefully it will be hybrid in person.
Excellent.
We'll be talking about funding for that workshop.
All right. Very important topic. And then too, for the audience out there, don't forget, fill out that survey for the folks at Mid-Continent. That helps them put on these programs and allows us an opportunity to come chat with y'all.
And there's a link to that you can click on in the chat.
Excellent. Anything else that I'm forgetting before we let everybody off there?
We've got another vote for watermelon here.
Oh, man, I didn't know this was a thing.
It's not, and that's what concerns me.
We've got some testing groups that need to go through, and I'll try it out. I'll try anything once. So I'll give. Remember, I'm an amateur connoisseur of milk products. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a fantastic rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you.
See you next time.